Deep Thoughts with Kai Plains Drifter.
You know, as I look at my beautiful Jackson bite here, I am somewhat reminded of a mermaid. You know, both of them just look sexy as hell, but much like a mermaid, you can't really have any fun with it until you figure out a way to, you know, add a couple of holes. So, I guess it's time for some surgery, bitch.
Well, if you're a drifter, then where's your hatch?
Hatch? Hatch? I don't need no stinking hatches.
Oh wait, here's one right here. DIY time again, and I tell you what, this one may be my biggest DIY attempt ever. It's gonna be scary, man. I'm gonna be cutting into the boat a lot, making big old holes, doing weird stuff to those holes. It's gonna be exciting. But before we get started on that, I just want to talk a little bit about why I'm doing this. As you know, the Bite FD has no real access to the inside of the hole. So that presents challenges for wiring. Potentially presents challenges if you want to install something like a boondocks or anything else where you need access to the landing gear, or access to the inside of the hole. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to install me a couple of hatches. I'm going to do this for a couple of different reasons. Number one, I do want the internal storage. Then the other big thing is, number two, I also really want to be able to wire the boat permanently for my fish finder setup. And to do that, you need to get access to the inside to make it all nice and clean like. So that is what I'm going to be doing today, is making this all nice and clean like and getting a couple of hatches installed. All right, now before we get started on this, I just want to point out a couple of things. Is that, man, you gotta set yourself up for success, man. You can't just get out there and start doing shit. You got to think about it and do stuff like get leaves out of the way. Look at that, gone. All right, the other thing you got to do too is, just looking over here, you got to make sure and dry fit everything. Now, I did a lot of measurements beforehand and looked at how this hatch was going to fit in here. There's a lot of complications with this install, and one of them you can see is going to be right down here. The raised deck, basically these ribs that run through here, great for channeling out water, not so great for installing hatches. So I'm gonna have to come up with a solution for the gasket seal and making sure that I don't have water intrusion. I think I've done that. I think I've come up with a plan. But then also, before you get started, just make sure and dry fit everything again. As you can see in here, I've kind of got this lined out. This looks like about how I want to get this installed, I think. And I'm going to do some more sophisticated measurements later and trace everything out and make sure I have a good clean cut. But this is going to be the front hatch install, and you can see right here that it fits. Yay! You can open it and everything. So, and it'll fit against the sides and open properly. Yay! All right, that's the first part of it. Another part of it, get your beverage situation lined out. Okay, that's important. Make sure you're properly beveraged, because I don't really know that that's hydration. Anyway, all right. Then over here you can see I've got my rear one as well, and of course I'm going to put links to all the ones that I'm using in this in the description, so you can see which hatch sizes fit for the Bite FD. But I'm just kind of lining it out here just to make sure everything looks good. It does look good, and pretty soon, man, it's gonna be exciting, dudes. We're gonna start doing some cutting. Hell yeah, man. All right, as you can see, what I've done is I've just used the hatch that I'm going to install as a template, and traced a line around the bottom there that I'm going to use to cut. I know that I'll need to cut just to the inside of that line right there to make sure that it is going to be a good tight seal. So not really rocket science here. Look, you've got a pretty good gap, as you can see, like right here. I mean, you've got about a good 3/4 to an inch, I'd say, of slop in there, so that if you don't get that cut exactly precise, it's going to get covered up by the hatch. But you do want to make sure and try to get it as accurate as possible. So it's looking pretty good. Now, one thing I do want to point out, I did use some spare weights that I had around. These are 10-pound weights. Just put that on top just to make sure that I don't knock it out of place while I am drawing the template and tracing around the outside of the hatch. Okay, so one thing you can see here, I just want to alert you to, is you're tracing from at the top. These ridges are going to present a problem, and so what you'll need to do is just kind of come back in here by hand and kind of provide yourself a rough guide to just kind of clean that up and provide a little bit of a cut. Just remember, you know, if you screw up on anything, you want to screw up by going too far to the inside, because you can like take more material back out if you need to later, but you can't add material back in. So you know, when you see these spots like here, if it doesn't quite line up, you know, you may want to like adjust that as you cut, or go through and do like I did, where you just kind of freehand that, because of these ridges right here. You can see the difference. It just didn't want to trace completely cleanly. So that is something that you'll need to watch out for as you do this, but no biggie. Just you can eyeball this. It's fine. It's fine. Just eyeball it. All right, so here's going to be the moment of truth right here, and this is the point of no return, where I'm about to make a big hole, and this is pretty much it for the kayak. So if this project doesn't go as well, then this is where I've screwed everything up. So all right, so I'm going to clarify what I'm doing here. This is going to be a hole so that I can get my jigsaw blade into, and then that way I can go ahead and use my jigsaw to cut this out. And you'll see, I just want to line this up so that right back here, the edge of the hole basically lines up with the outside edge, or the inside edge of where I want to cut, because that is going to be how I'm basically going to cut my opening. So that's why I'm drilling these holes in here. All right, you can see this is what the plug looked like from the first one I cut out here. Man, look how thick that plastic is. That's like a good 1/4 inch of plastic in there. Pretty impressive for such a light boat. So one important thing to note about these, make sure and save these plugs. And as I cut this other piece out, I'm gonna make sure and save all that. This is good plastic that you can use later if you need to weld to make any repairs to the boat at all. So make sure anytime you're cutting out any plastic or drilling out any plastic for the boat, you try to save it, because you can melt this down and then use this to do repair work later if you need to. So just a helpful tip there.
So right here I started cutting with the jigsaw, and you can see that I don't get very far with this. What happened is the shoe basically on the bottom of the jigsaw kept bumping up against the gunnel. Then I tried to remove the shoe and there was just too much vibration, so I just couldn't make it work. So on this first hatch up front, I did go ahead and switch out to my Dremel. I used the metal cutoff wheel that, you know, basically it's like a friction cut. It's a little bit different than a typical like kind of tooth blade, and I find that it goes through this plastic a little bit better. So you can see I go ahead and finish it off with the Dremel. This is interesting. When I open this up, there's a ton of standing water inside there. That was all just stuff that had come in, I guess, through like rivets or, you know, condensation that built up inside the boat. But there was a lot of water in there. So one of the best things about, you know, adding these hatches is I'll be able to clean that water out as it builds up. So with this first one, as you can see, I did use the Dremel and finish it off with that. I had to go back through and kind of touch up certain areas. It's a little bit hard to cut this completely round. Now the back hatch, I did go back and use the jigsaw, and that worked really, really well in that back hatch because it's rectangular. A lot easier to cut with the jigsaw, and I didn't run into that same issue where my shoe bumped up against the gunnels. It was just too tight a space for that jigsaw to work in up front. So there is some trial and error as I went through here. You can see I had to go back through and just clean up this hole quite a bit and remove material. And the big thing is just to go through, take your time, don't try to cut off too much at any one point, and just make sure that, you know, you're taking off just little bits at a time and looking to see where it may not be quite round, and then fitting it in place.
All right, so I just want to make a quick note here about the gasket material that I'm using. And you can see this is a pretty thick foam. This is a foam pad that I bought off of Amazon. I will link in the description. But you can see here, like, how much compression this stuff has. Very, very soft. Doesn't take much pressure at all. And then you can squeeze it down. And that's what I wanted, to be able to kind of fill in around the gaps for the way that the decking's built. And so this is a 3/8 of an inch thick foam. It is a neoprene foam gasket, I believe. And like I say, very, very soft. So, you know, as I screw the hatches down, it's going to compress in and around those spots in the deck where it's got the raised decking, and still sit up above the surface like it needs to. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to cut my gasket out of some 3/8 of an inch foam that I got from Amazon, and the link for that will be in the description. But what I'm going to do is just trace around the outside of this here with the knife edge, and then I'm going to cut it out with a pair of scissors. And then, as you can see right there, I just kind of made a trace line for me. That's all I wanted to do there. It's got a little bit of a cut, but all I wanted to do there was just give me something that I could use to go ahead, and then I'm going to cut that out with scissors. And then you'll see how I'm going to cut for the inside diameter here in just a second. So you can see I've laid the gasket that I cut out using the top outline, and now I'm basically gonna form it for the inside seal. So to do that, instead of like having to try to cut down here in the bottom or trace it again, I'm just gonna stand on this, and that should leave an impression that I can use at that point to cut out the inside of the gasket. So like right there, you can see a really nice impression there. All I have to do is just go in there and cut that out now. And then I've made my gasket for the rectangular hatch for the rear. And you can see I'm also going to do the same thing with the circular hatch as well, same process. But there you go. Also, for you foot fetish people, there you go. All right, make of that, do with that what you want to.
Let's get a close-up of the alien toe.
No, the alien toe's not going in. Okay, so as you can see here, I have dry fitted the hatch. I didn't make my cut in there, and have the hatch at this point, and it does fit tightly, but it does fit. One thing I want to point out here, you can see right here, I did have this on the cart before, and this was actually because of the way that the scuppers are reinforced right there. There you go. You can see how that scupper's reinforced in there. And that caused a bulge, basically, to kind of build. And you know, those bulges, they can be sightly and embarrassing. But anyway, what it was causing, this deck surface here, right here, to lift up, and so it was causing a bulge or a hump right here from front to back. So I did have to take it off the cart and just had to put it on the ground to get this thing to fit properly. And to sit and seal the way that it needs to. So I do want to show you one thing here real quick. Sorry about the shaky camera work, hard to do this with one hand, and my filming assistant is doing other things right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put holes here, 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 and here. I am not going to drill into this section right here or right here. And the reason why is because this is like right where the scupper is, and I do not want this even getting close to potentially leaking, because if you're leaking at your scupper, that's a pretty dangerous situation. So I'm not going to do that because I don't think I can drill in there cleanly enough and get a bolt in there. So I'm going to have just right up here where I've got bolts. All right, so as you can see, I did go ahead and pre-drill my holes there, leaving no hole there and leaving no hole there. So the rest of those I am going to, clean out a little bit just to make sure they don't have any extra plastic in there. And then I'm going to glue my gasket down first, and then put the hatch on top of it after that. Okay, so before you get started with trying to glue the weather stripping down, the gasketing, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit this up here, make sure and get in all the little nooks and crannies. I've got some alcohol on this rag. So that's what I'm using to clean that off to help make sure that the glue holds well. This part right here, where I glue the gasket down, I think is going to be either the make or break really for whether this is going to be watertight or not. Now keep in mind I will have compression that'll kind of hold this down as I bolt this in place. But one of the big problems you see, because these raised channels right here, make sure and get in close there. These raised channels right here, I'm going to have to make sure and really put a good amount of pressure in there to make sure that this gets
sealed against the sides well and stays watertight. So I'm gonna have to go through here and glue very carefully and just make sure that I get this thing kind of, you know, put pressure on it and keep pressure on it until it holds as I kind of go through here. Now, this contact cement I'm using is Gorilla Clear Grip. It's similar to E6000, but it's a little bit cheaper. But it is a contact type cement. So what you have to do is you put it down on your surface to be glued, or both surfaces to be glued. And you need to let it dry a little bit as well. Give it some time to dry. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and push this down. And to make sure that I get really good contact up against this edge right here, I am going to both use a weight right there. Then I've also got a small clamp that I'm going to push down here. So that should get that clamp in against this edge pretty well. Alright, from the steps I showed you before, it's just a simple matter of, at this point, just putting in some screws. I'll tell you what I'm using. I'm just using regular machine screws that are stainless steel, and then I'm putting a backing bolt and washer on the underside. What you can do too is the sections where you have the holes drilled, you can just like pop that up through once you've got your hatch where you want it after you've dry fitted it, and then that way you can kind of use a marker hole to be able to line up your screws as you screw them in. This is even without bolts on the back end of it, and as you can see, that's pretty sturdy, but I'm going to go ahead and add washers and stainless steel bolts. There you go. Look at that right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and add a little bead of sealant around that as well. But you can see that conformed pretty well. Right there, you see it conformed pretty well to the contours of the deck. And I'm pretty confident this is going to be a pretty waterproof solution. Alright, if you can hear me over the cicadas, you can see, like, look here, I've got the hatches done. They close nice and easily, they lock. You can see down here, like, that seal looks pretty good. I'm going to run just a thin bead of silicone caulk just around here on the outside just to help seal it even more. But you know, these open nice and easily, they shut easily, so that looks good. Moving to the back here, you can see the same thing. And again, you can see in here like how well that kind of sealed up along the bottom there. I think this is going to be pretty solid, man. Again, this hatchback here got tons of open storage space. You know, just for comparison, here's like the speaker, probably about the size of like a small tent. There you go. Like for a backpacking tent, something like that. So you can see that fits in there pretty well. And like I said, that's a little bit bulky, but anyway, you get the idea. Like, this is now a usable storage space, and more importantly, you do have access for wiring, which is my next project I'm going to get to after this. But very pleased with how everything works here. Like I say, just really smooth operation, no warpage, and importantly, I think that these hatches actually probably made this a little bit stiffer in the back. Like, I think this maybe provided a little more structural support. So quite pleased with everything on this. I am going to provide a list basically of the equipment that I use for this and the tools that I think you'll need to get this done. And I will run through that actually really quickly right now, I guess, maybe. So first of all, you're going to need a drill. Okay, so the drill bit that I used was an 11/16. So you're going to need an 11/16. The screws that I used were right here. Everything I used was stainless steel, and I used a number 10 1 inch, and then I used the stainless steel nylon backing bolts, or excuse me, the nylon threaded nuts for these machine screws. That way they will want to stay in place. And then I used stainless steel 3/16 washers for those. And then for the ones up front, I used a slightly different screw. I actually used a panhead machine screw for that. Again, those are 1 inch stainless steel, number 10 size, and then used again the stainless steel nuts with the nylon insert. The other equipment you're going to need either a Dremel or a jigsaw, or preferably both, to be able to cut, as you saw earlier. And then of course you need your hatches, and then you also need some type of glue, which is the Gorilla Glue that I'm using here. So that's pretty much it for this project. Like I say, I don't think the sealant is going to be necessary, but I've got it, so I'm going to run through anyway. So if you do want to use that, I've got clear sealant here as well. So that's it, man. That's the project. Like, I think it turned out pretty well. Pretty happy. All right, so as you can see right here, it looks like our seals that I put around there, the gasket and the extra sealant I put on there, looks like it's holding pretty well. I don't see a whole lot of leaks around this, so that's encouraging. Overnight rain shower gave me a chance to test this out, and it looks seaworthy so far. Pretty pleased. All right, bye.